First-person shooters have certainly found themselves with plenty of timeless examples of classic games that have and will continue to stand the test of time. Halo, the original Medal of Honor games, GoldenEye, just to name a few. Now that your nostalgia juices are surely flowing freely, let me drop another on you. Half-Life. Out of all of the classic shooters of old, few iterations of the FPS genre stand out like Half-Life games do, and it's not for no reason. The genre was definitely on its way back in 1998, but still in its relative infancy, especially with using actual physics and polygonal environments. Most FPS games up to that point were still relying mostly on flat images masquerading as three-dimensional ones to bring their worlds to life. And while Half-Life did have to pull a few magic tricks to get everything to work, it still was a massive leap forward for the genre. While it wasn't the first game to do what it did, it was the best version of it for the time. Solid controls, an engaging story, and its innovative approach to the genre made Half-Life a staple in its genre and gaming as a whole. The game reviewed incredibly well and was received just as welcomingly by gamers who played it endlessly well into, well, even today. While the original did get a port to the PlayStation 2, the PC crowd is really where Half-Life would find its footing, and the sequel was also no slouch and improved on basically every element. The thing is, that was over 15 years ago. There are now people who grew up playing the original Half-Life games that are now parents themselves with houses, cars, and full-time jobs. One thing they do not have, however, is a copy of Half-Life 3. Why is this? With a game that has been so relentlessly teased for over a decade, yet its existence never actually being confirmed or denied, Valve fans have amassed a long list of questions and expectations, most prominent of which being, what the hell happened to Half-Life 3? As with many sequels that never got made, much of what can be known is through understanding the previous entries. As the original Half-Life was a true success in every possible application of the word, so was its sequel, Half-Life 2. It not only had a better story and improved gameplay over the first, but it innovated and broke new ground for the entire genre with its outstanding AI, ragdoll physics, and top-notch writing for the time. As you might expect, Half-Life 2 went on to review better than almost any other game ever, with 10s and high 9s across the board, and it would sell millions of copies accordingly. There's no doubt about it, Half-Life 2 is one of gaming's most universal triumphs. The modding community also heavily supported the game, and this is a large part of what has maintained interest in the series for so long, with new texture packs and character models being released every so often to keep Half-Life 2 looking up to par. People can, even to this day, get a fun experience out of it relative to modern expectations. While any game developer would like to be in Valve's shoes in this regard, it could also be part of why they have been slow to make another game in the series. How do you follow up such a gargantuan success? How do you one-up one of the greatest games of all time? Does it even make sense to try? What if they made Half-Life 3 and it went the way of the Star Wars prequels, ripped apart by fans and marked the series forever? These are all valid questions that you'd have to be crazy to not think Valve has considered. With how much of an unmitigated success Half-Life 2 is, can you blame Valve for not wanting to muck it up with a third and possibly less satisfying entry in the series? Still, Valve has beaten around the bush with doing a real sequel, and not just with cryptic teases and murky rumors swirling around for the last 10 years about development starting and stopping. Half-Life 2 did have several re-releases with additional content, and even an additional episode that Gabe Newell himself admitted is essentially the beginning of Half-Life 3. But let's be honest, expansions and bonus chapters aren't really what the fans are after here. After all this time, with this much support being shown to the series, what fans really want is a real continuation of the story of Gordon Freeman and Alex Vance. While anything is certainly appreciated at this point, it's fair to say that it's past time for a real third game in the series with modern tech and a modern take. Interestingly, we may actually be close to getting something that more closely resembles that very thing with Half-Life Alyx. Although admittedly the story of Alyx takes place before Half-Life 2, so it won't be a true sequel, Half-Life Alyx does appear to be taking things up a notch from just bonus chapters piggybacking on the second game. Alyx will be a full-on VR game too, developed in-house by Valve, which is an interesting move for this series. While the ragdoll ragdoll physics and realistic geometries of the second game were a big part of what made it stand out. Using the relatively new technology for VR gaming could be the genius move that it needs to stay ahead of the pack and make the next giant leap for the medium. Many gaming commentators are saying Half-Life Alyx could make or break VR as a medium, and it's easy to see why. With an intellectual property this well known going into it, and thereby bringing its legions of fans with it, it's easy to imagine the massive impact the game could have on VR, and if successful, on the series itself, as this will be the first major release for the series since the release of Half-Life 2 Episode 2 all the way back in 2007, 13 years ago. Surely this will double as not only a huge injection of energy into VR, but also as a litmus test to see just how powerful the Half-Life IP is after all this time. If it can blow up VR like some think it might, then perhaps that could serve as some real justification for the production of a real Half-Life 3. Whether a VR Half-Life game whets your Half-Life appetite or not is going to be up to you, but it is a good sign for the series, so the question of what happened to Half-Life 3 is looking more and more like it should be rephrased to what is happening with Half-Life 3. And while not wanting to squander the enormously good name of the first two is surely a factor in the time that's been taken, the continuation of the series is looking to be less of a question of if and more of a question of when. That's it for this video. If you enjoyed and would like to see more, feel free to hit that subscribe button and hit the notification bell to ensure you'll be notified when new videos go up.